Well, good morning, everybody. It's awesome to be with you here again, wherever you are, in your car, in your living room. It's good to be on your devices this morning. So, welcome. We've been going over 1 Timothy for the past couple of weeks, and so far we've covered a bunch of good stuff. So basically, if you haven't been able to watch our previous services, we'll catch you up real quick, okay? So Paul is writing a letter to his understudy whose name is Timothy, or you could also say his disciple, right? So he's writing a letter to Timothy because Timothy is kind of a new pastor, and he's taking up a church in Ephesus, and he's going to be the spiritual leader over that church. And apparently things aren't going very well for him there in Ephesus. Paul, in his letter so far, we've covered how to beware of false teaching and knowing what that is, how to pray, how to worship. And last week we started talking about what it looks like to be in leadership and some of the qualifications for that. And I thought James did a great sermon last week. I went back and watched it. Good job. But today we're going to be continuing on. Now, this next little things that I'm going to say, just for a little bit, can't actually be proven to be true. But it's just kind of how my mind works, right? So we know that Paul wrote this letter to Timothy with all of these instructions, but I can't help but wonder if first Timothy didn't write a letter to Paul just saying, like, I need help. This is crazy, right? I didn't expect that this would be like this. Because I know that stepping into a role of leadership, that has been my experience, okay? So I'm imagining that Timothy is feeling overwhelmed, and he ponders back, he's looking back to the moment where, he was hanging out with Paul, and Paul's like, hey, Timothy, I think you should do this. I think you should go into ministry. And Timothy says, well, you think so? Like, you think I'm ready for that? Paul's like, yeah, well, you know what? God calls you to something first, and then he'll equip you later. So Timothy's feeling all gung-ho. He's all optimistic and uninformed, and he goes into ministry, and it hits him like a ton of bricks. At the church at Ephesus, all this stuff is going on. He doesn't know what to do. And so again, it's not proven. This is just where my mind goes. I imagine he's writing a letter to Paul, and he's just saying, help, right? Where is this equipment coming from? Like, he probably feels a lot like he's waiting for a package that just hasn't showed up. Right, like it's like you order something and Prime Delivery says your equipment's getting there on Tuesday, but then Tuesday goes by and it's not there, and he's wondering if he made the right decision. And then another Tuesday goes by, and then if you're ordering something and it hasn't come in, you're about ready to write a letter too to see, hey, where is this? So I like to think that just for fun that's what he did. And Paul is writing a letter, and then we're going to go over the part of what the qualifications are. And he spent time talking about the people that aren't really involved in leadership, and now we're going to go over the people that are. And so we're going to start in 1 Timothy 3. We're going to go verse 1, okay? So here goes. I'm reading from the ESV, if ever you're curious about that. It says, Paul's writing, this saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer or of an overseer, he desires a noble task. I'm going to stop there for a second. The word there used for overseer is the Greek word episkopos. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but episkopos. And so basically, you can find this word in the New Testament to kind of stand for three things. In a pastor, it means pastor. It could also mean elder, and it could also mean shepherd. Right, so now Paul is addressing the people who are to be responsible for the spiritual leadership of the church. So some examples of overseers that we have in our immediate context is anybody that you would say, oh, he's a pastor here or she's a pastor there. So James, Maria, Kristen, myself, Tammy, Josh is worship pastor also. So you could be like he oversees a certain amount of things in a spiritual leadership kind of way. So that is an overseer, somebody who oversees spiritually God's people. And he says here at the end of the verse, anyone who desires the office of an overseer desires a good work. Now it's kind of understood, it's never really talked about, that somebody who is in a pastoral position or a position of spiritual leadership, not that they have everything figured out, but they've figured out a few things, right? There's a certain amount of maturity that it requires for you to be in this position, and so everybody kind of knows that. Though, now I know Paul is specifically talking about pastors here, but I just kind of want to bring the conversation to anybody who is looking to grow in any kind of spiritual maturity or leadership, right? And this leadership, the word leadership, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be the leader of a bunch of people. Oftentimes, leadership starts with leading yourself. You are the first person that you need to lead. And so leadership, he's talking about anybody who aspires to lead something. So people who aspire to leadership for themselves generally want some kind of betterment in something, right? Like if you're somebody who struggles with impatience and you tie the end of the day off and you're looking back at the things that happened, the events of the day, and you're just not happy with it, and part of you just be like, I need to be more patient. I need to grow in patience. For me personally, that's been frustration and anger. It's something I work towards, is being less frustrated and less angry and more, even and level-headed. And that's part of where I want to lead myself well. So anybody who aspires to be in any kind of leadership, not just for pastors, he says two things. He says, you aspire a noble task. Right at the end of verse 1, it says, an overseer, he desires a noble task. Now, some translations will also say he desires or she desires a good work. That means that the aspirations that you have are good and they're honorable. And if that's you, we as a church, we love to come alongside you. That's what we want to do. We want to equip people to fulfill those desires of wanting to be better, wanting to be closer to Jesus, wanting to grow in your spiritual maturity. And so that's you. You can always reach out to one of us, and we'll be there with you. That's what we want. Okay, but he says two things. It's a noble task. So it's noble. It's good. Good for you. That's what you want. Awesome. But don't miss this. He says it's a noble task, or he says it's a good work. It's work, right? It doesn't mean that it's something you happen upon or you accidentally acquire. Leadership scales to yourself or around others is work. So fundamentally, spiritual leadership in the church is not about any kind of titles or glory. Fundamentally, it's about work. I know that some people aspire to do these things because they want some kind of accolade. I remember when I was sitting in pews, and I knew that I wanted to be in leadership positions, but I don't believe that my motives were fully right at the time. I wanted to be adored and admired by people, and I only really ever looked at that. I wanted people to look at me and say, "Oh man, like Ben is so great. He's the best," and that's all I ever wanted. I wanted kind of the limelight, and I wanted the title, and I wanted the glory. But you learn quickly, very quickly, that leadership fundamentally, especially leadership in God's family, is about work. And there's kind of two different types of work. Jesus says that if anyone desires to be first, he must be last of all and servant of all, right? And so leadership, in the light of that, doesn't sound as appealing sometimes to some. If everybody wants to be first, or any kind of a leadership or spiritual leadership over the church, he must be last of all and servant of all. So for example, I know it may not seem like it to some people, but this 20, 30-minute sermon, however long I'm going to go for, is actually the culmination of about 10 hours of study, of looking and compiling and getting things ready in order to serve you with some biblical truths. You read the Bible, you draw it out, and then it's in order to provide that service to you. Now, if you're sitting there, and by the end of the sermon, you're thinking, really? That took 10 hours to do? Keep that to yourself. I don't want to know. Just give me pats on the back and say, maybe he'll be better one day. I'm okay with that, right? And so it's this external servitude. A lot of the things that James and I and everybody, actually, I was going to say all the things, it's all to provide a service of some kind. If you picture a shepherd with their flock of sheep. And I know sometimes calling people sheep is mean. That's not what I'm saying, okay? But is that you aren't there for yourself. I'm not here solely to benefit myself. It's a benefit for me to work on myself, but the roles that we do are in order to provide whatever we can into lives of people who would listen, so that they can come closer to Jesus and then be better for it too, right? And so it's a service that we provide. That's the kind of the external work. There's another kind of work, and I've talked about it already, and it's an internal work that Jesus does on you. You can ask anybody in leadership that you come across that it's when you chose to make that decision, when you choose to kind of walk the right way, whether in leading yourself or you aspire, it's like God plucks you from wherever you are and plops you down on the fast track of dealing with your character deficiencies. You're going to deal with your character deficiencies at an accelerated rate. And it feels a lot of the time like God is stripping you down to bare wood and building back up, because maybe there's a lot of deficiencies there. I know for me, when I first started out in leadership, I had no problem telling people that they were wrong. I kind of actually figured that that's what leadership really is, telling people that they're wrong. And partially, that's because of my debater personality. If you know me at all, you know I don't know why God made me this way. I love debating. I love picking apart why people think the way they do. I love them doing that to me and then just figuring things out. It's fun for me. I know. Don't come after me. That's just the way I am. And so, but when I was immature, when I had immaturity in me, and not that I don't anymore, I'm still building my testimony here, but when I was even more immature than I might be now, I thought that leadership was all about having the ability to tell somebody that, hey, you're wrong. And then I would do that, and I would walk away, and I'd say, pat on the back, I did my job. I told them that they were wrong. Jesus is happy with me, right? There was an incident that happened, which was part of being on that fast track of dealing with my character deficiencies. We were, I think, a day out from leaving to a mission trip to Thailand. This was years back. And so this was kind of the last day I was going to be with my family before we go. And I wanted to hang out with them. And I get a phone call from a couple of our youth kids. And basically what they say is that they phone me and they say, hey, we've just seen a couple of the other youth kids. They're out in public at the Millennium, and they're drinking, they're being rambunctious, and they're getting drunk. And I, receiving this phone call, I'm a little aggravated at that. It makes me angry because I have a higher expectation than that. And so my heart may have been in the right place, but my actions were not. I frustratedly got in my car and I drove to Millennium. I walked around and I found them. And I proceeded to not very graciously explain to them or tell them how they were wrong. After I did that, I patted myself on the back. I went home, said, good job, I'm a pastor. And so the next day we went on our mission trip. I get a phone call when we're in Bangkok, Thailand, from my wife, who I very selfishly left to clean the mess of what I did. But I had upset about an entire family of people. And in hindsight, that action led to no good. Nothing changed. Nothing was better. Love was not given. I went down there and I clanged my gong without love, and nothing happened. And that propelled me to be on the fast track of dealing with that character deficiency I had. I learned that I can be right, but I can still be wrong in how I go about things. So when you decide to go into a leadership position or to lead yourself, you can expect that God will take you, pluck you from where you are. He'll put you on the fast track of dealing with your character deficiencies, and that's okay, and that's good, that's noble. Like he says, you're desiring a noble task. There's a process to it. It's work. It's external work, serving others. It's internal work, working on yourself. It's work. It's a noble task. Leadership in the church and leadership to yourself is fundamentally not about titles and glory. It's about work, and it is work. So let's continue on. That was verse 1. I got a whole chapter to do, so feel free to take an intermission. Okay, so we're going to go verse 2. I'm just going to start reading it. It says, therefore, an overseer must be above reproach. We all know what it means to be above reproach. And from verse 2 down to verse 8, he's going to go and explain what it looks like to be somebody that is above reproach. Okay, so let's get to it. The husband of one wife. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to be married in order to be in a spiritual leadership position. It just means that you would act as somebody who is a one-woman or one-man-woman. I'm just going to get it. A one-woman man. Somebody who is husband material or somebody who's wife material, right? And that specifically there is talking about somebody who you can look at and see faithfulness as part of their life. So somebody who is the husband of one wife. The next, it says, is sober-minded. This doesn't necessarily speak on drunkenness because that's coming later on. But not that it doesn't either. That's in there. It talks about sober-mindedness. But it also is to say that it's somebody who is able to think clearly and in a serious way, right? On the opposite, contrary to that, would be somebody who just think everything is one big joke all the time, and they're never able to take something seriously. So anybody who aspires to be in leadership must be able to think seriously and in a clear way, or think clearly and in a serious way. It doesn't mean that that's who you are 100% of the time, all the time, but you have the ability to do it. Moving on. Self-controlled, must be self-controlled. That's also kind of saying two things. It doesn't just mean that you are able to control yourself when you are facing temptations, but it also means that you're somebody who can take initiative, who can propel themselves in order to do a work. Somebody who is able to control themselves and take initiative in things. That's what that one's saying too. Respectable, hospitable, able to teach. That's an important one right there. Able to teach. You have an understanding, and you're able to convey that understanding in a way that other people can receive it and understand it. Not a drunkard. There's the one I was talking about. Now, it says not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome. Somebody who's quarrelsome is somebody who might be energized by drama. Like we all know these people in our lives. Whenever there's drama happening, they're not trying to stay out of it, but they're just trying to put themselves right in the middle of it because that energizes them. So not somebody who's energized by drama, not quarrelsome. This one here, not a lover of money. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have any money, okay? That doesn't mean that they're not a millionaire. I believe, and if you want to talk about it later, I would love to, because that's the debater side of me, that you could be worth $500 million and still not be a lover of money. Okay, don't get that wrong. It doesn't mean that you don't have any money. It means that you don't worship it, right? It was God that said that Jesus said that you either love God or love money, and the two can't coexist. They walk hand in hand. Not a lover of money doesn't mean that you don't have any. He must manage his household well with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household well, how will he care for God's church? This one is a little heavier, this one. You must manage his own household well. Now, I know it says here that it says keeping his children submissive. The word submissive has sort of become a swear word in our culture today, right? If you were to say, you're so submissive to somebody, that's an offensive thing to say now. But in here, it's not speaking in the sense of having somebody under submission, as in keeping them under your thumb, right? Like, you guys ever watch the Goofy movie? And Goofy's trying to take Max out on a fishing trip, and Max secretly wants to go to the concert. And then so it's kind of going sort of well, but then the neighbor, Peter, comes in, and he's like, you got to keep him under your thumb, Goof. And then it all starts to go sideways. That's not what he's talking about. It's not that keeping somebody on your thumb kind of submission. It says, you must you must manage your own household well with all dignity. This is somebody who is worth following, right? Somebody who is worth being under, somebody that you can look up to and aspire to and say, I want to be like that one day, so I'm going to place myself under that person in order to absorb qualifications, qualities that they have that I want to have. So keeping his children in submission, picture a father or a mother whose children aspire to be like them. That's more what that's saying. For if someone does not know how to manage their own household, how will he know how to take care of God's church? This is more specifically talking about people, overseers, pastors, elders, who are in a church position, that if your house is falling apart, it's going to be really hard to deal with God's house. But the reason I was saying that this is specifically heavy is because your household is the proving grounds for your Christian character, right? Because character is who you are when nobody's watching. You got it? I'm just going to say it one more time, is that your household is the proving grounds for your Christian character, because character is who you are when nobody's watching. I met one time with a son, and we were talking about he didn't have a great home life. And we were talking about the way he was being brought up. And so I remember at one point he said to me, he says, everybody loves my father. I go out in the town, I'm in the gas stations, and people find out who my dad is, and they have nothing but praises to say about him. And he is great, and everybody loves him. But then he'll come home, and he'll yell at us, and he'll abuse us, and our house is falling apart, and it seems like he hates us. And I wish it was the other way around, he said. I wish he hated everybody, and that he would love us. Who are you when the door is closed? When nobody's watching, what is your character? Your household is the proving grounds for your Christian character, because character is who you are when nobody's watching. Now, I will give a small exemption to this, a very small one, and it's very for particular people. I do believe that there are times when a father or a mother is doing the best that they can, and they are following the things that God would have them to do. And for a period of time, it still doesn't work. We're not saying that this is a qualification that you look at a moment in time. This is something overarchingly over the course of a lifetime. How are you behind closed doors? What's your character like? How do you stand up against the list so far? And then we'll go on. We're going to read the rest a little bit. It says, he must not be a recent convert or recently become a Christian or come into relationship with Jesus, or he may become puffed up with conceit or pride and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Right? Pride before the fall. You can't elevate somebody too quickly. He says he may fall. It also means that he may not. There might be a time where somebody can, be a recent Christian convert and step into a position of leadership right away. And maybe that's true. But the warning is heavy enough that the Bible's saying, don't take that risk, right? Is that it's okay to take time with your leadership. It's okay to take a couple years and evaluate somebody's character and evaluate if their impact or if their faith has actually impacted their behavior. It's okay to slow cook your leadership, right? Everybody knows that slow cooked food is better. And so it's okay to take time with it. That means have grace on yourself. You're going to mess up as you try to go along this walk of Christian faith, as you try to pursue Jesus closer. Your leaders are going to mess up, and you're going to mess up, and have grace on that. Have grace for yourself and have grace for them. What matters is that you are desiring it and you are working towards that in your own life. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders so that he won't fall into disgrace or trap of the devil. There's times, and it happens, it happened recently, where things go sideways in life. And it might not be your fault, but it might have something to do with you a little bit. And where nothing you can say is actually going to help benefit your situation, right? Where your reputation and your character will have to go before you. There's going to be times in leadership, or for yourself, right, where people are going to have a reason to talk about you. And at that point, the only thing that's going to, speak defense to you is your character, right? And so he's saying that be somebody who's well thought of by outsider. And live it peaceably as much as it depends on you with everybody, because your character will go before you in certain situations. Okay, so here's what the list doesn't say about leadership and about leadership in God's church. What it doesn't say is how many overseers there should be in one church, right? Paul's not telling Timothy, you got to have 8 of them. There has to be 8. Every church has to have 8 pastors. That's not in there. The New Testament doesn't say. How long should somebody be an overseer? The New Testament doesn't say. Should there be one of them, one overseer that umbrellas over the rest of them? The New Testament doesn't say. It's not too specific about that. That doesn't mean that that's wrong. It's just not specific about that. It doesn't see it as an issue that's super worth addressing. What are the specific duties of an overseer? Like clerically, like what are the things that they have to do? The New Testament doesn't say. The New Testament is not too specific on how many hours you put in the office or where you are. The New Testament doesn't say. It's not too concerned with that. The overseer's job description has little to do with the structure, but more to do with the character, right? The description that is given has little to do with the structure, but more to do with the character. More to do with the character. That doesn't mean that structure is bad. I'm not trying to diminish structure. I believe structure is important. But you could have the best structure in the world and have people of bad character running it, and it will all sink. It's all going to falter, and it's all going to fall. And oftentimes, when something is going wrong, maybe in the context of a church building and the way of a church function, when something's going wrong, people tend to look at the structure of things first. But what we need to do, and what we often end up doing, I think New Life does a great job at this, is we look at the character of the people running the structure. And on a personal level, when you find things are going wrong in your life and everything's kind of falling apart, oftentimes what's the question that we hear? What am I doing wrong? You probably ask yourself that quite a few times. What am I doing wrong? What aren't I doing right? And that shouldn't be your question. Your question should be, maybe you're not doing anything wrong, right? But maybe it's your character that's wrong. Maybe it's how you're going about it that is wrong, right? It's this fight between doing and being. Your relationship with Jesus has little to do, and has always had little to do with all the things that you need to do, but it has more to do with who are you becoming as a person. Who are you becoming? Because if your relationship had to do with the things that you should be doing, salvation would look a lot different, right? Then it would be right to say that you need to come to church 8 times a month and then you'll go to heaven. Like, that's not what it's like. It's who are you becoming rather than what are the things that you're doing. And a lot of times, I think we distract ourselves with the things that we want to do in order to ignore who we're becoming, right? In order to ignore the things that we've become, we kind of self-medicate with, I'm just going to do all the right things, but it doesn't help. It doesn't solve the problem. I was reading a book, a great book. I'm just going to plug it. If you haven't read Dangerous Prayers by Craig Groeschel, go and do that. It's not a very long book. It's very good. But he was talking about one of the dangerous prayers that we tend not to pray is asking God simply just to search us, search our hearts, and reveal to me who I've become and what I'm becoming, right? Search me. Where do I need to make adjustments? What do I need to fix? What do I need forgiveness for? And it was funny, he said that if all of your prayers had been answered for the past week, I want you guys we're going to talk about this. It's a bit of a tangent, just stick with me. If all of your prayers for the past week that you've prayed have been answered, what would have happened? Would you have simply just eaten a blessed meal? Would you have just gotten to where you're going safe? Maybe had a good night's sleep? Would you have, made it to that meeting on time, right? Or would you have been sent by God to do something for him? Would you have allowed him to search your heart and reveal to you things that need to be worked on? We tend to distract ourselves with the do in order to avoid how to be. Your relationship with Jesus has more to do with who are you becoming than what are you doing. The list also doesn't speak on giftedness. It says you must be able to teach. That might be the closest one. Other than that, it doesn't speak on giftedness. It doesn't mean that you put somebody in any kind of leadership just because they can do something well. Because God is able to bestow gifts on people in a moment's time should he choose to do that, right? And so a lot of us, we think we don't have the equipment that we need in order to do something. Timothy probably didn't think that he had the equipment that he needed in order to fulfill the task in front of him. And Paul didn't give him any specific structures on what to do. He just said, focus on the character, right? Focus on your character. We're going to move on now to verse 8. And I guess it also, with this list, it doesn't mean you need to be perfect. I think I've said that already. You don't have to work it perfectly. You don't have to fulfill and get 100% on the qualifications test of 1 Timothy chapter 3. It just means that you're somebody who values it, you desire it, and you work towards these character qualifications. Verse 8. Y'all ready? How long have I been going here? We're good? Verse 8. Deacons likewise must be dignified, not double-tongued. Deacons, if you don't know what deacons are people who are in charge of a general area of service within the church itself. Right? And so an example of deacons is that deacons were first brought in Ephesians, in Acts chapter 6. Right? The apostles at the time, where they were going out, they're preaching the gospel, and they're busy doing that. And so what was happening is they were neglecting certain issues that were arising in the church. One of those issues that was brought to them was they were neglecting the widows, and they weren't really doing a good job at taking care of the widows. And so this issue was brought to them, and they decided we need to figure something out. And so what they've elected to do is they are going to get people, as they're going to call them, deacons, in order to take care of some of the other works that are in the church. So you think about, in our church context, people who would be deacons would be anybody who is providing a service that doesn't necessarily have to do with the ability to teach. Because the list for deacons and overseers is pretty similar, except for the one qualifications for deacons is that they don't need to be able to teach. Okay? So board members at the church would be deacons. They provide a service over an area. Another would be the Operation Feast ladies who feed 200 plus people a week. They would be considered deacons in our church. And so is the list for deacons. It says, deacons likewise must be dignified, not double-tongued. That means they're not one way here, they're not one and then another way over there. Not addicted to much wine, not greedy for dishonest gain. They must hold the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience. Now, whenever we hear the word mystery, I think we assume it's something that we don't know. But the mystery of the faith is that Jesus was the Son of God. He came down, died for our sin, went to the dead, rose again, went to heaven, and now we can do that. That means that you hold to your faith with a clear conscience. There's nothing heavy weighing on you that you are hiding. You have a clear conscience about how you've walked your faith. And, starting at verse 10, and let them be tested first. Then let them serve as deacons if they prove themselves to be blameless. Their wives, or let's just say spouses likewise, must be dignified, not slanderers, sober-minded, faithful in all things. Let deacons each be the husband of one wife, managing their children and their household well. For those who serve well as deacons gain a good standing for themselves and also great confidence in the faith that is in Jesus Christ. You'll see the list is pretty similar to the list that is given to the overseers, except for that ability to teach. But I really want to focus on this last sentence, okay? It says, for those who serve well as deacons gain a good standing for themselves and a great confidence in the faith that is in Jesus Christ. I talked about the position of pastors and how there's a perceived kind of glory or title that might come with that. And when you're talking about somebody who might wash the floors, you might feel like that's not a very limelighted position. But I want to talk about Stephen for a second. Okay, Stephen, who we just talked about, was elected a deacon to take care of the widows. Acts chapter 6, verse 8. I know I didn't give it to the production team. You'll be all right. It says, full of grace and power. This is talking about Stephen. He was doing great wonders and signs among the people. Right? This is Stephen, whose sole job in the church was just to care for widows. He was doing great wonders and signs, and he was full of power and grace, so much so that the Pharisees felt threatened by him, and they seized him, and they brought him before them to testify, what are you doing? Because they didn't really like him. And he kind of, doesn't say nice things to them, and they actually end up killing him and stoning him for the great signs and wonders and the things that he was doing. Anyway, so as he was being stoned to death, he's kind of a famous line, I think most people know it. He looks up to heaven and he says, behold, I see Jesus standing at the right hand of the Son of Man. So Jesus, the deacon, the one whose job was just to take care of widows. It wasn't to spread the gospel. It was just to take care. Jesus stood for him at his time of his passing. That is an honoring thing. I don't think there's anything out there that could honor somebody more than Jesus standing for them as they're passing. And what I want to say here is that what God sees as honoring is different than what man sees as honoring sometimes, right? You think, I want to illustrate this real quick you think everybody knows, or most people I believe know who Billy Graham was, right? Billy Graham, in the course of his lifetime, I Googled it, you could Google it too. He preached to about 210 million people in like 80 something different countries. It's a lot of people, right? No, here it is, 185 countries. I was off by 100 countries. He preached to 210 million people in 185 countries. This is somebody who was an overseer, and he was faithful with that task. But if you get to heaven one day, don't be surprised. I think there's going to be lots of surprises for us in heaven. If Billy Graham is about 10 million down in the line of people who serve faithfully, and above him might even be just people who were great, faithful mothers, people who were great and faithful like Stephen was, and just taking care of what God had put before them. God puts before you everybody different things, and all that matters is not whether people think highly of you or not, but what God thinks of you, and being faithful to him with your life. Deacons, yeah. So we're going to finish off. We're going to go to verse 14 to 16. You finish off with called The Mystery of Godliness. I hope to come to see you soon. This is Paul again writing to Timothy. But I am writing these things to you so that if I delay, you may know how one ought to behave in the household of God. And it's funny, when he uses the word household there, he is describing a church family, and especially relating to authority. And the authority that would have been understood at that time, where you would have a fatherly authority. relating to the responsibility of those who have that authority. Household of God, which is the church of the living God, a pillar and buttress of truth. Great indeed, we confess, is the mystery of godliness. He was manifested in the Spirit, vindicated by the Spirit, seen by angels, proclaimed among the nations, believed on in the world, and taken up to glory. I don't really use the word buttress in my regular vocabulary. Maybe it's pronounced buttress, I don't know. But basically what that's saying is that we as Christians are entrusted with the task of promoting and protecting the gospel, right? And a lot of the ways that we do that is through our character and not just through our words, not just through what we're able to say, not through the structures of the things that we can do, but who are we and who have we become? And so we all have that task to do that. So how's your character? Are you maybe feeling like, that it could be worked on? If so, that's great, because you can do that. Everybody is capable of doing that. Some of us might have more challenging road than others, and that's okay. And that's what the church is for, and that's what the church family is for. And so as I close out the sermon, let me just pray for you, and then we'll enter worship again. Jesus, thank you for your word. Thank you for all the guidance it gives and the power that we have through it, Jesus. I pray that you search our hearts. Jesus, every one of us here, every one of us listening, search our hearts and reveal to us what we need to be, how we need to be, and allow us not to be distracted by all the things that we need to do, but let us know how to be better for you. Lord, let us know how to be so that we can be closer to you, so that we can throw off everything that hinders and run to you, Lord, unhindered. So, in Jesus' name, amen.